Hello, this is part of the Seven Giants series of talks on the world's great powers. Um, a great nation, the one nation that has contributed to literature a great deal is Japan. They invented the first novel. Um, it's also the world's third largest economy. It's a great postmodern power and it has developed since the Second World War when it gave up militarism after its defeat by the United States, principally, um, into becoming an economic giant. For before the European Union became the world's largest economy, it was the USA was the top dog and Japan was the second biggest economy. Recently things have changed a lot with the development of China, India, Russia. The world has become a multipolar world. Rather than Japan being under the protection of a hyperpower of the United States, Japan is increasingly seeing its future as a Pacific power, developing links with its neighbours, which are still quite hostile to Japan for the reasons coming from the Second World War, particularly South Korea. Although it is an ally of Japan and hostile to North Korea, it's still quite hostile to Japan as a nation. So also is China. Uh, Japan particularly has territorial disputes with Russia, which it's got to sort out. Um, Japan, if there was any war between the United States and China over Taiwan, because China would like to invade Taiwan, which it sees as rebel province, but the United States sees as a independent uh, Chinese Nationalist Republic, then Japan would be drawn into this. A brilliant book to read, although is from the 1990s. It had a very far-seeing, and realistic view of would have happened from 1995 up until 2001. Of course, it didn't foresee the attacks of 9/11, but in terms of East Asian energy and security, I would really recommend you find a book on Amazon called Asia's Deadly Triangle by Ken Calder. Now, why do I call Japan postmodern power and a weird paradise in the title? Fundamentally, the Japanese power is resting on their economic might as the world's probably is equal with China as the world's second biggest exporter after the European Union. Um, the USA is the world's second biggest economy, but it's a net importer of goods and services. So it imports a tremendous amount of services and goods from China. But if you thought the billions in debt that the Americans owe China is anything, then the $1 trillion of US dollars that are held by the Japanese post office, which the Japanese have saved because the Japanese are traditionally savers, and that is one of the reasons why the Americans are worried about this trillions of dollars flooding in onto the open market and flooding the dollar and diluting its value. So they'll do anything they can to make sure the Japanese keep that in their saving system, and they'll continue to do whatever they can militarily for the Japanese to secure their islands against any outside threat. Now, the Japanese economy has been in a deflationary cycle, and this is caused by the Japanese love of saving. They are hard-working people, and they save nearly 25% of their income. Some people save 50% of their income. This is the complete opposite of the credit-hungry UK consumer and the American consumer are net importers of goods and services from other countries, and you buy everything, almost everything, on credit. It's all on the arm, you know. The the Japanese, though, that have caused their own deflationary cycle, because if inflation through the Bank of Japan's increasing the money supply, it just isn't filtering through to make consumption uh, more more conducive to the Japanese consumer, because the more they save, the more the prices go down in the shops, and the longer they wait to buy a purchase, which then means lots of people are unemployed. So inflation and deflation can be just as bad as each other. Uh, Inflation is almost a fraud, and deflation is a bad circumstance. Now, Japan gives tremendous amounts of it imports tremendous amounts of rice, but it also exports tremendous amounts of rice and food to abroad in aid. It paid for the first Gulf War. It wasn't prepared to pay for the second Gulf War because of its deflationary crisis. Uh, it is not a military dwarf by any means. Until quite recently, it had the world's second biggest navy after the United States. But of course, North Korea has boosted up its navy in numerical terms, although they're by no means as good as the Japanese warships or Western warships at all. Um, but also the resurgence of Russia maybe tipped the balance in favour of Russia, which incidentally sold a lot of its Pacific Fleet to North Korea, which is not widely said on Russia Today. I wonder why. The reason why I call Japanese society a weird postmodern paradise is because their cultural significance to the West and to other Asian countries, Oriental countries, is so great. They invented the first novel. They have a tremendous extent of cinema. If you're familiar with Akira Kurosawa's films, Seven Samurai, these were all converted into westerns with Clint Eastwood. Why is it a weird paradise? Because the conformity of Japanese society, which is still based on a quite feudal system, which comes from the samurai, is not to be underestimated. And people have gone into these, young people in Japan have gone into these sort of tribalist cliques, which are very different from the norm in Japan. Now, there is a problem with Japan, and that is that money laundering is not illegal, just as it's not illegal in Israel, and there is a tremendous amount of power in the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza. They have their tentacles extend over most of the world through different organisations that front their activities, and they are deeply involved with the Russian and Italian mafia as well. I'm going to be doing a vid on organised crime and terrorism very soon, and I recommend you watch it because you'll learn something. Overall, though, I'm very positive towards Japan. I think it's a great country. It just needs to sort its society out, and I think it will once it returns to economic prosperity. Thank you. Peace.